Hello everyone and welcome to this talk on behavioral analysis of sound-based social interaction. I am Marta Rizzonelli and together with my colleagues Professor Dr. Jin-Yun Kim, Pascal Staud, Marcello Lussana and Dr. Benjamin Stahl, we are working on a 3-year project conducted at the Humboldt University of Berlin and funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. The goal of the project is to investigate the potential of the body-machine interface called sentire in promoting social interaction in both real-world contexts and specifically designed experiments, both for the general population and among people with specific therapeutic needs. Here is a brief overview of the talk. First, I will present sentire and explain our working hypothesis. Then I will illustrate the aims of our research and one of the methods we apply. Finally, I will report the results of the studies we have conducted so far and draw some conclusions, which also give an outlook about what we plan to do next. Sentire is an interactive music system that uses bracelets to trace distance and touch between subjects and provides real-time sound feedback. Sentire includes a custom software programmed in Super Collider, of which you can see a screenshot in the picture on the top, and the hardware, which you can see in the two pictures on the bottom. The hardware is a capacitive sensing system that takes advantage of the electric conductivity of the human body to detect proximity. Based on proximity changes, the interactional inputs of the two users are sonified thanks to a specific parameter mapping and sound design. Based on the informal observations we conducted in an artistic context, we developed our main hypothesis, namely that sound-based nonverbal interaction promotes basic prosocial behaviors. We want to stress the word basic because we are not talking about all kinds of prosocial behaviors, but only about those that do not necessarily require social cognition and intention. These basic behaviors are often disregarded in social ontology, but actually build the premise for more complex social behaviors, and are particularly relevant in social interaction mediated by sound, which is, as I said, our field of research. To investigate these basic behaviors, we set our primary focus on coordination. In fact, coordination is considered one of the basic mechanisms of social interaction, as De Jager and Di Paolo have argued, and can be detected empirically through behavioral observation. It is important to stress that coordination does not only refer to synchronization or entrainment, which can be used as synonyms, on the temporal axis, but also to behavioral matching, which can be understood as affectivity and or as empathy. Our aim is to answer two main questions. The first one is, do basic prosocial behaviors involving coordination emerge from dyadic social interaction mediated by sentire? And the second one is, does the usage of sentire over a span of time correlate to an increasing trend of those behaviors? So we are interested in whether prosocial behaviors emerge, first of all, and whether they increase when sentire is used for several sessions. To answer these questions, we analyze the results of the first two pilot studies we have conducted. In pilot study 1, two participants suffering from psychosomatic disorders interacted with a trained music therapist over 3 sessions. The therapist had used sentire before, so she was able to shape the interaction and guide the patients through it. In pilot study 2, instead, two strangers with no previous experience of sentire interacted with each other freely and were not given any specific instructions other than please interact with each other through movements but without words. To analyze the interaction, we applied structure observation using the open source software ELAN from the Max Planck Institute of Psycholinguistics. Here you can see a screenshot of the software. Top left, the video recordings of the 3 cameras are played simultaneously and can be zoomed in or out at will. And on the bottom, you can see the 4 main categories of our coding scheme, which we tailored ad hoc for our research purposes: whole body movements, arm movements, mutual gaze, and mutual communicative gestures. The latter category was originally called mutual smile, but had to be adapted when the use of a facial mask became compulsory. All categories are coded for each participant individually, first for participant A in red, and then for participant B in blue. Since we developed our coding scheme ex novo, it was necessary to test its reliability first. The strength of structural observation is that the same videos are coded by 2 independent observers who use the same predefined coding scheme. To assess inter-observer agreement between them, Cohen's kappa is calculated, which is a value between 0 and 1 and can be interpreted as the table indicates. So, for example, a kappa value of 0.80 corresponds to a strong inter-observer agreement and therefore to a reliable coding scheme. Thanks to inter-observer agreement on the one hand and to the variety of numerical data that ELAN can extract from the coding on the other hand, structural observation is a robust, quasi-quantitative method for behavioral analysis. Now let's get to the results of our pilot studies. The Cohen kappa value for pilot study 1 is 0.85, which indicates strong inter-observer agreement. As for interaction, there was a consistent presence of behaviors that we can define as basic prosocial behaviors. On average, about 48% of coordinated whole body movements and about 59% of partner-oriented arm movements for the overall interaction time. In dark and light gray, you can see the percentages for each individual patient. It's important to stress that partner-oriented arm movements are calculated only with reference to the patients, as we assume that the therapist orients her arm movements toward the patient purposefully to reach the therapeutic goal of facilitating social interaction. Interestingly, there was also a remarkable increase of mutual gaze and smile between each participant and the music therapist over the 3 sessions. There are significant subjective differences between the 2 patients, but on average, mutual gaze increased by 3 times and mutual smile increased almost tenfold from session 1 to session 3. A possible explanation of this could be that the evolution of the therapy has led to increased confidence of the patients towards the therapist, which could have made it easier to exploit Sentira's potential to its fullest. In pilot study 2, each couple of interactors had only 1 session, so in this case, we are not observing any long-term developments. Pilot study 2 yielded a Cohen's kappa value of 0.76, which, according to the table we saw earlier, corresponds to a moderate inter-observer agreement, although it is closer to the highest end of the moderate range, which is included, as you might recall, between 0.60 and 0.75. As for interaction, even in the study, there was a consistent presence of basic prosocial behaviors. On average, about 51% of coordinated whole body movements and about 24% of partner-oriented arm movements for the overall interaction time. In this case, partner-oriented arm movements are averaged between the 2 participants, A and B, as there is no therapist-patient relationship bias to rule out. For consistency with respect to pilot study 1, I am showing you the results of mutual gaze and mutual communicative gestures also for pilot study 2. Mutual gaze occurred on average for about 6% of the time, and mutual communicative gestures for about 2% of the time. However, given that we are observing only 1 session per couple, these results are not particularly significant in this case. They will be when compared to control conditions where stimulation different than Sentira is used, And this is exactly what we have planned to do for the subsequent experimental study. So, in conclusion, we can claim that coordinated and directed behaviors are solidly present during the usage of Sentira, even in the case of participants using the system for the first time and interacting with a stranger, as in pilot study 2. At the moment, we are working on bigger sample sizes. In particular, for study 2, which follows pilot study 2, we have recorded data for 120 subjects, and for study 3, we recruited 15 romantic couples that will undergo 5 sessions of couple therapy each, 2 of which will be conducted with Sentira. Moreover, in study 2, we aim to exclude possible confounding variables by comparing nonverbal interactions supported by Sentira with interaction in 2 control conditions, recorded sound and no sound. Together with the data that are currently being analyzed, these findings represent an encouraging basis for ongoing and further studies. The form of nonverbal improvisational interaction that we have discussed may prove useful for therapeutic and well-being oriented purposes, which are indeed the ultimate goal of the Sentira project. It would be great to discuss the possible application of Sentira in these fields too, but this would be the subject of another talk, which I hope to be giving soon. So for now, this is all from my side. I thank you all very much for watching, and I am happy to answer your questions in the remaining time. On this final slide, you can find the references mentioned in the presentation and also my personal contact should you have any further queries or need for discussion. Thank you very much.